This is the Hex Base. It's an action figure peg stand that can be made to work with almost any figure that has holes in the bottoms of its feet. You're probably very familiar with what peg stands are. It's usually just a piece of plastic with a single plastic nub coming out of it that can, maybe work with your figures. It might work with some, but because it's only got one size peg, there's going to be a lot of figures that it doesn't work with. Even within the same line, you're going to have some figures that won't work with that. So you wind up buying a whole bunch of different peg stands, hoping that you can cover all the toys in your collection, but you wind up having a shelf that's got a bunch of different peg stands on it, and you're still going to have figures that don't fit. The Hex Base fixes that problem. What makes the Hex Base different is that it uses a modular peg system, so you aren't just stuck with one size of peg. If you need a different size, you can just take the peg out and put a new one in. Even within the same toy line, you can find between 3 to 5 different sizes of peg sockets in the bottom of a figure's foot. There hasn't really been any incentive for companies to standardize these because it's ultimately not their problem. It's your problem. After almost 2 years of work, the Hex Base now has compatibility with the vast majority of popular and other figures on the market that have peg sockets in their feet. Marvel Legends, Star Wars Black Series, DC Multiverse, DC Icons, Diamond Select, Masters of the Universe Origins, Masters of the Universe Classics, Mythic Legions, NECA, bunch of vintage stuff like TMNT, vintage Star Wars, Superpowers. These things all work, and things that don't work can be made to work because it's a modular system. In addition to high compatibility, one of the core requirements for a good peg stand is that it's also stable and can resist sudden jostling and disturbance. You can see for yourself, but they can take quite a bit of disturbance without toppling. A good bit more than most of you would probably put your figures through on a regular basis. I hope. You can also see that it makes quite a bit of difference versus just having the figures standing up on their own. The final requirement for a good peg stand is that it be space efficient, which is why I designed the Hex Base with a nice tessellating design that allows figures of differing body types to fit together well while also allowing them to be visible behind each other in separate rows. For a quick reference on how space efficient this is, you can fit 27 of these on a Day-12 shelf. The Hex Base comes with 3 standard size pegs. These pegs are the ones that I found fit the widest array of figures, so that's why they were chosen to be the ones that were included with the bases as a default. There are 2 expansion sets beyond those. Expansion set 1 features an extra large and an extra small peg. These are not necessary at first, so don't feel like you have to buy them outright with the Hex Bases. It is nice to have some around because there are a few figures in some lines that are almost entirely covered by the standard pegs that do have odd sizes, but you really don't need to buy these until you know you need them. If you do collect NECA figures though, I recommend getting them up front because they have the widest variety in peg slot sizes, so you will probably need them. Expansion Set 2 is a set of pegs that is specifically tailored for Mezco 1/12 figures. If you don't collect Mezco 1/12 figures, you don't need them, but if you do collect Mezco 1/12 figures, then you do. You are probably wondering, how do I tell the pegs apart from each other? The way you tell pegs apart from each other is you count the number of divots that are carved into the peg bar and the position of those divots carved on the peg bar. There will be handy-dandy charts up on the pages for the item that will detail exactly how to tell which peg is what type. Let's get into explaining how you use the Hex Base. When you first receive your Hex Bases, they are going to have a protective paper coating on both sides. This is to prevent scratching and damage during shipment. In order to remove this coating, you're going to want to look for the notch that's cut into one edge of the Hex Base. This is a good starting point to peel off the paper. You're going to want to pick at the edge of where that notch is cut, the little corner at the edge of the base itself, and that should allow you to easily pull the paper up and then have a good tab to pull from to then remove the rest of the paper. Just repeat this for both sides. This is how you use the Hex Base. The first thing that you need to do is figure out which peg will fit your figure the best. So to do this, just take the pegs that you have and test fit them into the slot in the bottom of the figure's foot. The one that you don't have to jam in and that also isn't too loose, that's the one that you're going to want to use. So go ahead and set that aside, and now we can insert that peg into the hex base. You are going to want to take the hex base and set it on a flat surface. Then you want to take the peg that you would like to use, and you want to place it inside of the peg slot on the hex base. You are going to want to put the end that has the peg sticking out of it all the way into the slot, all the way towards the back, leaving the front end sticking up, just like shown. Then you are going to want to take a flat object, which could be a coin, a plastic card, another base, something that you can apply even pressure with, and you're going to want to use it to push the end of the peg that is sticking out into the slot. It might make a popping or squealing noise as you insert the peg this way. That's normal, totally fine. Now that the peg is inserted into the hex base, all you need to do is just leave that hex base on the flat surface, take the figure that you want to use, and insert the peg into the slot on its foot. That's it, you're done. The hex base features two slots. The slots are angled towards the center on one end and towards the outside on the other. This is so that you can just turn the pegs around in the slot to change the width of the stance of your figure. If the figure uses a more narrow stance, angle it towards the center. If the figure uses a wider stance, angle it towards the outside. You can also utilize both slots at once to use two pegs with the figure. This can give you some extra stability when necessary and is just a nice option. When you want to remove a peg from the hex base, all you have to do is turn it over and apply pressure on the peg from the back. You can either use your thumbnail or a penny or anything else that you want to use to get that pressure and leverage going. Just be ready because sometimes they can pop out. The hex base will be available starting April 2nd at 5 p.m. Los Angeles time on CanofBeams.com. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions whatsoever, please do not hesitate to reach out to me.